I want to start today with, well, a very specific, deeply uncomfortable feeling that I think almost everyone listening to this has experienced, like at least once in the last month.
Oh, I bet I know exactly the feeling you're talking about.
Right. It's like 11:30 p.m. You're lying in bed, the lights are off, and you're just staring at the ceiling because you suddenly realized you forgot to send a calendar invite.
Yep. The classic midnight panic.
Exactly. And then, you remember the client proposal that's just sitting in your drafts, and then you remember you need to order more printer toner, of all
Oh,
things.
it's the worst. It's like your brain is just scrolling through a list of every minor failure.
It is. Your brain is essentially running like a distributed denial of service attack on itself.
Hmm.
And the crazy thing is, we're completely surrounded by this cultural mythology that says, this is good.
Right, the whole hustle culture thing.
Yeah, like if you're exhausted, if your inbox is on fire, and if you're the bottleneck for every single decision in your business, well, congratulations, you've made it. You are successful.
Oh, wow. It's basically the founder's paradox, right? We've built this entire business culture around the aesthetic of the hustle
Yeah.
rather than, the actual architecture of output.
The aesthetic of the hustle. I like that.
Yeah, I mean, you see people wearing their sleep deprivation like a Rolex. It's a status symbol.
Totally.
But when you actually dissect the anatomy of their day, they aren't executing high-level strategy at all. They're just functioning as a highly paid, extremely anxious human router for mundane tasks.
Which brings us perfectly to the operational thesis we are tearing apart today. We're doing a deep dive into a framework designed to rip you out of that exact anxiety loop.
And it's a very necessary extraction, I would say.
Absolutely. The concepts we're dissecting today come from the A.D.D method, which stands for automate, delegate, delete. It's heavily detailed in the book Streamline Success.
Which is a fantastic resource, by the way.
It really is. And to be clear, right up front, whether you're, a VP trying to untangle a massive corporate department, a startup founder running on fumes, or just someone trying to stop drowning in your own personal workflow, the mission today is for you. We're going to figure out how to stop being that human router.
Right. And I think the foundational shift we have to make before we even get into the mechanics of ADD is redefining what efficiency actually looks like in practice.
Because it's not just doing things faster, right?
Exactly. The natural instinct when you're overwhelmed is to apply more force. You drink more coffee, you download another productivity app, you set your alarm for 4:30 a.m. instead of 5:30 a.m.
Guilty. I've definitely done the 4:30 a.m. alarm thing. It never works.
Right, because applying more force to a broken system just breaks the system faster.
Yeah.
The ADD framework, what it does is it forces a structural pivot.
Okay, what does that mean exactly?
It demands that you stop trying to just increase your capacity for suffering, and instead you start engineering a workflow where the suffering isn't required in the first place.
I want to push on why we resist this so much, because the resistance is fierce. Like, think about a lead architect designing a massive skyscraper.
Okay, I'm with you.
Their unique, irreplaceable value is in the structural engineering, right? The aesthetic vision, the high-level math that keeps the building from literally collapsing.
Right, the stuff only they can do.
Exactly. But instead of sitting in the drafting room, this architect is down in the mud on the construction site, stubbornly insisting on mixing the cement themselves.
Right, sweating it out in the dirt.
Every single day, covered in dust, exhausted. And if you ask them why, they say, well, no one mixes the cement exactly the way I like it.
Which is such a common trap.
It's an insane misallocation of human capital.
Yeah.
Why are we so desperate to mix our own cement?
That's a brilliant way to frame it, honestly, because it gets right to the core psychological friction here, which is the sunk cost of competence.
Sunk cost of competence. Unpack that a bit.
So most entrepreneurs or managers, they get promoted or they get their business off the ground precisely because they were very, very good at mixing the cement.
Right. You have to be in the beginning.
Exactly. In the early days, you have to do everything. You are the janitor and the CEO. But the psychological trap is that your brain permanently maps that gritty tactical work to survival and success.
So even when the business outgrows the tactic, you can't let it go.
The business outgrows it, but your ego doesn't. When you're mixing cement, you get an immediate, tangible dopamine hit.
Yeah, you can look at it and say, I made that.
Right. You mixed a batch, it looks good, you accomplished something today. But drafting the blueprints for a building that won't exist for 3 years?
That is way too abstract.
It is abstract. It's fraught with uncertainty. It's honestly kind of lonely. So we retreat into micromanagement and busy work because it provides this highly convincing illusion of control.
Wow. An illusion of control, that hits hard.
It does. And the ADD method is entirely about confronting that illusion. It forces a transition from a reactive posture, where the environment is just constantly dictating your actions, to a proactive architectural posture.
Which means we really need to look at how to actually build that architecture. Because if the goal is to get our architect out of the mud, the first logical step is to see if we can just, buy a machine to mix the cement for us.
Exactly. Let the machine do the heavy lifting.
Right. So let's move into the first pillar of this framework: automate. I think people hear automation and they instantly picture like physical robots in an Amazon warehouse, or they think of giant enterprise companies with massive IT budgets.
Yeah, they think it's out of reach for them.
Exactly. But we are really talking about the digital workforce here.
We're talking about software acting as your connective tissue. Because when you conduct a forensic audit of a modern professional's day, the sheer volume of time spent just moving data from one silo to another is staggering.
Oh, yeah. Just copying and pasting for hours.
Right. The primary candidates for automation are the repetitive binary actions. We're talking scheduling, data entry, inbound lead routing, and those initial customer touchpoints.
But how do you actually spot those? Because when you're the one doing them, they don't feel binary. They feel essential.
They feel like work.
Yeah. You convince yourself that manually typing a client's address from an email into a spreadsheet requires your specific human touch.
Well, it requires a ruthless time audit, but not just looking at hours spent. You have to look at the cognitive drag.
The cognitive drag, what's that?
It's the mental energy a task consumes. You calculate the ROI of automation not just in the minutes saved, but in errors prevented and mental bandwidth preserved.
So it's about the cost of messing up too.
Absolutely. If you're manually bridging the gap between your inbox and your database, and you drop a zero in a massive client invoice because you were tired.
Oh man, that is a nightmare scenario.
Right. The cost of that human error exponentially outweighs the couple of hours it would take to build, say, a Zapier flow to do it perfectly every single time.
Now, you bring up the team's role in this, which I think is where the audit often falls apart, because the CEO rarely knows how broken the granular processes are, right?
Oh, the CEO is usually the last to know. The frontline operators are the only ones who truly know where the friction is.
So how do you get them to tell you?
The framework insists on building a feedback loop where employees are not just allowed, but heavily incentivized to point out stupid processes.
I love that. Hey, boss, this process is stupid.
Exactly. If an account manager is spending 90 minutes every Friday compiling a status report by copying and pasting cells from 4 different Google Sheets, that is a massive failure of systems.
That's a waste of their brain.
Totally. But if leadership doesn't create an environment where the account manager feels safe saying, this is a waste of my talent, the leadership will literally never know to automate it.
Let's get into the mechanics of the tech stack that makes this possible without, getting bogged down in a boring software manual.
Right. Keep it high level.
Yeah. We're basically talking about platforms that talk to each other through APIs. Your project management software like Trello or Asana, your CRM like HubSpot or Salesforce, your financial stack.
The tools that run the modern office.
Right. But here is my major hesitation with hyper-automating all these touch points. I've been on the receiving end of automated businesses. We all have.
Oh, I know where you're going with this.
You submit a query, and you instantly get trapped in this Kafka-esque loop of automated replies, chatbots that completely don't understand context, and just these frictionless systems that are actually incredibly abrasive to the actual human user.
Infuriating.
It really is. If you automate your scheduling, your follow-ups, your onboarding, don't you risk hollowing out the soul of the business? Like, you just sound like a robot.
It's what we call the uncanny valley of customer service, and it's a very, very real danger if you view automation as a replacement for the relationship.
Right.
But the A.D.D methodology has a very strict boundary here. You automate the logistics, never the empathy.
Automate logistics, never empathy. That's a great rule.
You automate the routing, you don't automate the judgment.
Give me a tangible example of that boundary. Like, where exactly does the machine stop and the human begin?
Okay, let's look at inbound sales. Let's say a prospect downloads a white paper from your site. The incorrect, completely soul-sucking way to automate this is to have a bot immediately email them, pretend to be a human named Dave, and aggressively try to book a demo.
Oh, we've all met Dave. Dave is awful. He ignores everything you actually asked.
Dave is a churn engine. He actively drives people away. The correct, what we call the cyborg approach to automation, uses the machine to set the stage for the human.
Okay, walk me through the cyborg approach.
So the prospect downloads the paper, the system automatically cross-references their email domain with LinkedIn, enriches the data to see company size, pushes that enriched profile into your CRM, scores the lead based on their industry, and if they're a high-value target, it instantly pings the Slack channel of your best human salesperson.
Wow, okay, so the salesperson has all the context immediately.
Exactly. But it also sends a highly transparent, automated email to the prospect saying something like, "Thanks for downloading. Our system flagged this for our senior strategist, Sarah, who is reviewing your company's profile right now and will reach out personally this afternoon."
See, that is entirely different. The automation did all the heavy lifting of research and routing, but it explicitly protected the integrity of the human interaction.
Yes, exactly.
Sarah steps in with full context. She has zero data entry fatigue, and she has maximum bandwidth to actually listen to the client. You basically use the machine to buy the human the time to be fiercely, effectively human.
Precisely. Automation clears the brush. But inevitably, you're going to hit a wall.
You can't automate everything.
Right. You will encounter tasks that absolutely require human judgment, nuance, and creativity, but, and then this is key, they do not require your specific judgment, nuance, and creativity as the founder or manager.
And that is the threshold where automation ends and the second pillar begins.
Yes. Delegation.
Delegation. Which, I'll be honest, is where I see the most spectacular managerial failures in the business world.
Oh, without a doubt. And it's because most people don't actually delegate.
Yeah.
They abdicate.
Yes. Or they do what I call dumping.
Dumping is a great word for it.
Right. They hoard all the interesting, high visibility, strategic work, and they just dump all the administrative sludge onto their team.
And then they wonder why morale is in the toilet and turnover is at like 40%.
Exactly. I always try to think of delegation less like a relay race where you just blindly pass a baton and hope they don't drop it, and more like managing an open source software project.
Oh, that's an interesting comparison.
Yeah, so like you, as the leader, write the core architecture. You define the parameters, the ultimate goal, and the coding standards, but you allow your contributors to write the specific modules.
Okay, I see what you mean.
You give them the autonomy to solve the problem their way, as long as it integrates with the master build.
That open source analogy is vital because it highlights the necessity of structural alignment combined with tactical freedom.
Tactical freedom, meaning they decide how to do it.
Right. The framework we're dissecting today frames delegation fundamentally as an engine for professional development, not just a pressure release valve for the boss.
That's a huge mindset shift.
It is. If you are only delegating the sludge, you are actively degrading your team's capability over time. Effective delegation requires you to look at your task list and cross-reference it with the developmental gaps of your team members.
So it's almost like a matchmaking process. You're matching tasks to people who need to learn those exact skills.
Exactly. Let's say you have a brilliant mid-level engineer who is technically flawless but lacks executive presence, and they really want to move into management.
Okay, pretty common scenario.
You don't delegate your expense reports to them. You delegate the presentation of the quarterly technical roadmap to the board.
Oh man, which is terrifying for the founder to let go of.
It is absolute agony for the founder because the founder knows they could do the presentation better, they could do it faster, they wouldn't, stutter on slide 4.
Right, they want to jump in and save it.
Which is where you have to implement what the source calls the 70% rule.
The 70% rule, what is that?
If a team member can execute a task 70% as well as you can, you absolutely must let it go.
Just accept the 30% drop in quality.
Yes, because that 70% will grow to 90% over time, but only if they are allowed to stumble through the reps. If you swoop in and save them the second they struggle, you haven't delegated anything.
You just created a vastly more complicated, micromanaged version of doing it yourself.
Exactly. You're just backseat driving.
That brings up the tension of visibility, though, because if I hand over this crucial presentation to the board or this major client account, how do I actually know the building isn't burning down behind my back?
That's the fear, right?
The instinct is to check in every hour. Like, hey, just seeing how that deck is coming along. Hey, did you email the client yet? Which immediately destroys the trust you supposedly just handed them.
And this is where we bring the tech stack back into the conversation. The antidote to micromanagement is asynchronous visibility.
Asynchronous visibility. I like that phrase.
You do not manage via Slack pings. You manage via dashboards. You establish the parameters of the project inside a robust project management environment, like Trello or Asana.
Right.
You clearly define the definition of done, you establish the milestones, and then you step back. The dashboard allows you, the manager, to monitor the velocity of the project without ever interrupting the flow state of the employee.
So you can literally see the cards moving across the Kanban board.
You can see the commits in the repository, you can see the milestone check-ins, and if a card sits in the doing column for 3 days on a one-day task, you don't attack the employee, you investigate the bottleneck.
So it changes the conversation.
Completely. You say, I see this task is stalled.
Yeah.
Is there a resource you need that you don't have?
Yeah.
It changes the dynamic from surveillance to support.
Okay, so we've built the automated routing system to handle the robots. We've deployed the open source delegation model to empower the team.
Yep, the foundation is set.
But anyone who has been in business for more than 6 months knows that you can perfectly automate and perfectly delegate a deeply flawed strategy.
Oh, absolutely. Doing the wrong things very efficiently.
Exactly. You can become incredibly efficient at doing things that just shouldn't be done at all, which ushers in the final, most violent, and honestly most effective pillar of the A.D.D method.
Deletion.
Delete.
Yeah.
The sheer terror of saying no. I find this to be the most fascinating part of the framework because it requires what I call strategic incompetence.
Strategic incompetence. I love that.
You have to willingly drop balls that people expect you to catch.
It goes against every instinct of the modern professional, doesn't it? We are conditioned to equate output with value. Like the longer the to-do list, the more important the person.
Right, exactly.
But deletion is the active, hostile pruning of your operational branches.
Yeah.
It is the realization that the vast majority of activities in a business do not drive the core objective. They are simply the chaotic byproduct of momentum.
So let's dissect the prioritization frameworks that actually give people the permission to delete things. Because you can't just delete at random, right? You can't just stop paying taxes.
Oh, please don't do that.
The cornerstone here is the Eisenhower matrix. And look, I know every corporate retreat in the world talks about urgent versus important, but I think people fundamentally misunderstand how sinister this matrix actually is in practice.
Oh, they definitely do.
Let's break down the quadrants, specifically focusing on where people lie to themselves.
Okay, so the matrix is a 2x2 grid. The x-axis is urgency, the y-axis is importance. Quadrant 1 is the upper left. Tasks that are both urgent and important.
Oh,
the crises.
the fires.
Right. The server is melting down, a massive client is threatening to breach contract, payroll didn't clear. These are non-negotiable fires that you must put out immediately.
But the lie we tell ourselves is that everything in our inbox is quadrant 1.
Yes. Everything feels like a crisis.
Because the adrenaline of the crisis is kind of intoxicating. You get to play the hero, you swoop in, you fix the server, everyone applauds. But if your entire week is spent in quadrant 1, you aren't managing a business, you are just surviving a series of traumatic events.
And the reason you are constantly in quadrant 1 is almost always because you are neglecting quadrant 2.
Which is?
This is the upper right, important but not urgent. This is the deep work.
The strategy.
Exactly. Strategic planning, designing scalable systems, building deep relationships with your top clients, conducting postmortems on failed projects to extract the lessons.
But because it's not urgent, there is absolutely zero penalty for ignoring it today. If you don't do your strategic planning on a Tuesday, no one yells at you. The building doesn't burn down.
Exactly. The decay is silent. But 6 months later, because you didn't build the scalable system in quadrant 2, the server melts down again, and you are right back in the adrenaline loop of quadrant 1.
It's a vicious cycle.
It is. The goal of the deletion framework is to aggressively protect quadrant 2 time. And you do that by mercilessly hunting down the tasks in the bottom half of the matrix.
So let's look at the bottom half, quadrant 3,
Sure.
Urgent but not important. I call this the quadrant of deception.
It is the most dangerous quadrant because it wears the disguise of productivity.
What lives in quadrant 3?
The phone ringing. The constant barrage of Slack notifications. The colleague who drops by your desk for a quick chat that derails your focus for 40 minutes. Honestly, most emails live here.
Yeah, they feel urgent because they just popped up.
The key insight is that quadrant 3 tasks are usually highly important to someone else, but they do not advance your core objectives.
Right. They are someone else's quadrant 1 bleeding onto your desk.
Yes, these are prime candidates for aggressive delegation or strict batch processing. You do not let quadrant 3 dictate your schedule. But the true deletion, the real magic, happens in quadrant 4. not urgent and not important.
Now, you would think this is just people watching YouTube at work, but it's actually much more insidious than that.
Oh, it's disguised as real work.
It's the busy work. It's the weekly status meeting that has existed for 3 years, where 10 people sit in a room for an hour, literally no decisions are made, and everyone just reads their updates from a slide.
We've all been in that meeting.
It's generating the 40-page analytics report that the client literally never opens, ever.
This is where corporate inertia is the ultimate enemy of efficiency. The justification for quadrant 4 is almost always, well, we've always done it this way.
Right.
To counter this, the framework demands you overlay the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule, over your operations.
Right.
The universal truth across almost every industry is that 80% of your meaningful results come from 20% of your inputs.
The distribution is everywhere, right? It's in wealth, it's in software bugs, it's in agriculture.
And it is absolutely in your client base and your product lines. If you ruthlessly analyze your CRM data and your financial dashboards, you will almost always find that 20% of your clients generate 80% of your profit.
Which means the other 80% of clients.
Conversely, the bottom 20% of your clients, the lowest revenue generators, almost certainly consume 80% of your team's emotional bandwidth, support tickets, and revision requests.
So to truly implement deletion, you don't just delete tasks, you delete the bottom 20% of your clients. You fire them.
You fire them, or you raise their prices to a point where they either leave on their own or they become profitable enough to actually justify the friction.
Wow.
You delete the underperforming product line that is sucking up engineering resources. But doing this requires immense courage, which is why the framework relies so heavily on data.
Because you can't just delete things on a whim.
Exactly. You run time tracking software like Toggle or Harvest. You log exactly where the team's hours are going. When you have the hard data showing that an unprofitable client is consuming 40 hours a week of your lead developer's time, the emotional block just disappears.
The data gives you the permission to drop the axe. I want to take all of this, the automated routing, the open source delegation, the ruthless 80-20 deletion, and see what happens when it survives contact with the enemy. The beauty of this framework is that we have empirical proof of its mechanics in the wild.
Yes, the case studies in the source are fantastic.
Let's dig deep into these case studies because they prove that this isn't just like theoretical Silicon Valley optimization. It applies across the entire spectrum of commerce.
The first environment we should examine is the classic service business that scales too fast and breaks. Case study 1 is a mid-sized marketing agency. The friction point here was the onboarding phase.
Oh, onboarding is historically a nightmare for agencies.
It really is. It's highly manual, it involves massive information asymmetry, and it sets the tone for the entire relationship.
So what were they doing wrong?
Well, this agency was running their onboarding via scattered email chains. They would close a client, and then an account manager would send a Word document questionnaire.
Oh, no. A Word doc.
Right. And the client would inevitably lose the document, or fill it out wrong, or send assets via 6 different Dropbox links. The account manager would spend their first 3 weeks just hunting down basic brand guidelines instead of actually strategizing.
So the account manager is entirely stuck in quadrant 3, just chasing people down.
Exactly. So they applied the automation pillar. They built a structured intake flow. Once a deal was marked closed won in their CRM, it triggered a webhook.
Okay, so the software wakes up.
Yes. That webhook instantly provisioned a dedicated client portal, generated a dynamic intake form tailored to the specific services sold, and sent a beautifully branded welcome sequence.
No more Word docs.
No more Word docs.
No.
When the client uploaded their assets, the system automatically routed them to the correct structured folders in the cloud and populated the initial tasks right into the agency's project management board, tagging the specific creatives assigned to the account.
Let's look at the second order effects of that, because yes, they obviously save time, but the real leverage is the psychological impact on the client.
It changes everything.
The client goes from signing a contract and dealing with a chaotic, messy email thread to experiencing this frictionless, highly engineered, deeply professional environment. It builds immediate, massive trust.
And for the internal team, the cognitive load of data wrangling is just eliminated. The account manager walks into the kickoff call, not to ask for a logo file, but to present the strategic roadmap.
They get to do the real work.
Right. The text explicitly notes that by automating this initial friction, the agency saw a measurable increase in client retention rates. They used software to basically buy back the time required to build a sticky relationship.
Now, that's a digital business. But what about atoms? What about physical inventory? I love Case Study, too, because it strips away the whole tech bro veneer. It's a local brick-and-mortar bakery.
The bakery is perhaps the most visceral example of the founder's trap.
Yeah, flour everywhere.
Exactly. The owner was a master baker, an artisan. But as the business grew, the owner stopped baking and became a chaotic supply chain manager.
Oh, that's heartbreaking.
They were spending hours in the back room with a clipboard, manually counting sacks of flour, estimating yeast usage, cross-referencing sales receipts, and then calling 3 different suppliers to place orders by phone.
It's the ultimate chopping onions scenario we talked about earlier, but with actual flour.
So true. So they applied deletion and automation in tandem. They didn't just automate the counting, they deleted the concept of manual inventory entirely.
How did they do that?
They upgraded their point-of-sale system to one with integrated inventory management. Every time a croissant was sold at the register, the system deducted the exact fractional amounts of flour, butter, and yeast from the master database.
Okay, so the POS becomes the single source of truth.
Then they set automated threshold triggers. When the butter supply dropped below a 3-day run rate, the system automatically generated and sent a purchase order directly to their supplier.
That is profound. They completely abstracted the supply chain out of the founder's brain. So what did the founder do with those reclaimed hours? Did they just go home early?
No, they went back to the kitchen. They developed new seasonal products, which drove higher margins. They spent time at the front of the house talking to the neighborhood regulars, which built community loyalty.
Wow.
By automating the back end, they significantly increased their top-line revenue because they were finally allowed to operate in their zone of genius again.
Let's pivot to a larger scale, where the problem isn't just one founder, but a complex matrix of employees. Case Study 3 looks at a mid-market tech firm suffering from the chaos of informal delegation.
This is the danger of the Slack culture.
Yeah, explain that, because I think a lot of people are living this right now.
So the firm had a highly talented engineering team, but work was being assigned completely informally. A product manager would just walk by an engineer's desk and say, "Hey, can you look into this bug?" Or they would drop a vague request into a group chat.
Which feels fast and agile, right?
It feels agile, but the result was a culture of invisible workloads. No one actually knew who was responsible for what, deadlines were totally fluid, and the most competent engineers were quietly drowning because everyone just went to them for everything.
The sunk cost of competence again. The reward for good work is just more work.
Exactly. So management finally stepped in and rigidly applied the delegation pillar via a centralized project management architecture like Jira or Asana. They mandated that if a task was not in the system, it did not exist.
Oh, that's a hard rule.
No more hallway assignments. Every request had to be formalized, scoped, and assigned to a specific owner with a highly visible deadline.
I can imagine the initial pushback on that was fierce. Engineers historically hate administrative overhead. They view Jira tickets as just pure bureaucracy.
Oh, the transition is always messy. But the breakthrough happened when the engineers realized that the system wasn't there to track them, it was there to protect them.
Protect them how?
The visual dashboard allowed the engineering manager to look at a developer's queue, see that they were overloaded, and physically block new requests from coming in.
Ah, it's a shield.
It created a protective wall around their focus. The firm saw a massive boost in team morale and accountability simply because the expectations were finally made visible.
And the final one, Case Study 4, is my favorite because it is pure, unadulterated deletion. A high-end creative agency that was essentially choking on its own revenue.
Right. They had grown rapidly by basically saying yes to every client that walked through the door.
A dangerous game.
Very. They offered branding, web development, SEO, social media management, PR. They were a full-service agency. But when they applied the 80-20 analysis to their financials, the truth was horrifying.
Let me guess, most of those services weren't actually making money.
Exactly. Their core competency, high-end brand identity design, was wildly profitable and won awards. But their social media management and PR retainers were incredibly low margin, consumed massive amounts of daily operational bandwidth, and generated constant client friction.
So it's Quadrant 3 masquerading as Quadrant 1.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they made the terrifying, counterintuitive decision. They deleted the services.
Just completely.
They didn't try to optimize them. They didn't try to automate them. They simply stopped offering social media and PR. They dropped those projects from their roster entirely.
They intentionally shrank their top-line revenue. I mean, that requires nerves of steel.
They took a short-term hit to their gross revenue, yes. But the downstream effects were transformative. With the low-margin noise eliminated, Their best creative minds were completely unleashed to focus entirely on premium branding.
Which is what they were actually good at.
Right. And because of that, they raised their prices because their portfolio quality skyrocketed. Within a year, they were significantly more profitable with a smaller, highly focused team than they ever were as a bloated full-service agency.
Deletion was their growth strategy. I want to pause and synthesize the overarching theme here, because if you look closely at these four radically different businesses, a singular truth emerges. None of these case studies are about cutting corners, right?
Not at all.
None of them are about being lazy. The A.D.D framework is actually a resource reallocation mechanism. You are capturing the lost energy from friction and redirecting it into velocity.
You are fundamentally changing the physics of your operation.
But, and we have to address this, there is a dark side to this.
And pushback.
Yeah. When you introduce this level of systemic rigor, when every process is mapped, every task is tracked on a dashboard, and every low-value activity is mercilessly deleted, how do you keep the humans from feeling like cogs in a ruthless machine?
Right.
Especially in creative fields, there's a profound tension between operational efficiency and the messy, nonlinear nature of innovation.
It is the ultimate paradox of management. The fear is that if you systematize the environment too heavily, you sterilize it.
Yeah.
You kill the magic.
Right, because you can't have a brilliant epiphany on a Gantt chart. You can't assign a JIRA ticket for out-of-the-box thinking. Creatives need space to wander. They need the freedom to chase a bad idea for 3 days just to realize it leads to a great idea. If you tighten the screws too much, don't you crash that?
It's a highly valid concern.
Yeah.
But if you look at the psychology of high performance, the exact opposite is true.
Really?
Yes, absolute unconstrained freedom is actually paralyzing. It creates anxiety. The A.D.D framework doesn't seek to systematize the art. It systematizes the studio so the art can happen.
Explain the difference. What does that mean in practice?
Think about cognitive load, or what we can call mental RAM. A creative director has a finite amount of mental RAM, right?
Right.
If 60% of their RAM is consumed by low-level anxiety, worrying if the contractor got paid, wondering if the client received the revision, trying to remember what time the status meeting is, they only have 40% of their bandwidth available for actual creative problem solving.
Yeah, okay, I see.
By automating the workflows and delegating the logistics, you are freeing up their RAM.
You are building the canvas.
You build a highly rigid, reliable canvas so that the paint can be as chaotic and expressive as it needs to be. The structure creates a psychologically safe environment. When the team trusts that the system will catch the logistical balls, they can fully immerse themselves in the deep work without the constant, low-level panic of dropping something.
The framework also leans heavily into visual capacity management to protect morale, which goes back to what you said earlier about the dashboard being a shield, not a surveillance camera.
Workload fairness is the absolute bedrock of team loyalty. Uneven task distribution is the fastest way to breed resentment in any company.
Oh, for sure.
When you use Kanban boards or resource management tools, you make the invisible workload visible. If your top designer has 20 complex tasks in their queue and a junior designer has 2, the system alerts you before the top designer burns out and quits. It allows you to balance the scales proactively.
But it's not just about task distribution. How do you maintain the human connection when so much of the interaction is mediated through screens and dashboards? Like, if we're not talking on Slack, how do we connect?
The book really emphasizes the necessity of intentional feedback loops and the celebration of micro wins.
Micro wins.
Yeah. In a highly streamlined system, the manager's role shifts from taskmaster to coach. When an employee successfully executes a newly delegated high-level task, the recognition must be immediate and public. Furthermore, the system itself must be open to critique.
Right, the operators need a voice.
Exactly. The operators need a mechanism to say, hey, this automation we set up is actually creating a bottleneck.
A system has to be agile.
If the humans feel that they serve the system, morale collapses. If they feel the system serves them, morale skyrockets.
Okay, we have excavated the philosophy. We understand the psychological traps of busyness. We've mapped out the tools to build the digital connective tissue. We've seen how ruthlessly deleting the bottom 20% transforms profitability and how structure actually protects creativity.
The foundation is there.
The philosophy is sound, but philosophy doesn't clear your inbox. The final hurdle is moving from theory to execution. How does the listener listening to this right now actually dismantle their current chaotic workflow and build this architecture?
Well, you cannot rebuild the engine while the car is driving down the highway at 80 miles an hour.
Right.
The very first step is pulling over. You have to establish a baseline through a comprehensive operational audit.
Which means confronting exactly how bad the current situation is.
It requires brutal honesty. For 1 week, you log every single activity you engage in, every email, every meeting, every manual data transfer. And then you force every single one of those activities through the Eisenhower matrix.
So you color code them.
Exactly. What is truly Quadrant 2 strategic work
Yeah.
and what is just Quadrant 3 noise.
I can imagine the results of that first audit are usually highly depressing.
They are universally horrifying. Most founders realize they're spending maybe 10% of their time on high leverage growth and 90% on maintenance and putting out fires. But that horror is the necessary catalyst for change. Once you have the baseline, you begin the implementation phase, which the framework structure dictates must be handled through strict cadences. The daily and the weekly review.
Let's break down that cadence. What is the operational difference between the daily and the weekly?
The daily review is tactical. The weekly review is strategic.
Okay.
The daily review should take no more than 10 minutes at the end of your workday. You are simply clearing the brush. You look at what you accomplished. You note any immediate bottlenecks that are blocking tomorrow's work, and you select the top 3 non-negotiable tasks for the next morning.
It's just setting the table for tomorrow.
Exactly. You close the loops so your brain can actually power down and sleep, avoiding that 11:30 p.m. ceiling stare.
But the weekly review, that is the core operating system of this entire methodology, right?
The weekly review is where you actually practice the A.D.D method. You carve out 90 minutes, usually on a Friday afternoon or Sunday evening, and you zoom out.
You look at the big picture.
You look at the holistic trends of the week. You ask the hard questions. What recurring annoyance popped up 3 times this week that I can automate with Zapier on Monday? What Quadrant 1 crisis happened that I can permanently delegate to a team member by writing a standard operating procedure? What project is clearly dying on the vine that I just need the courage to delete?
You're constantly pruning the tree.
If you do not prune the tree weekly, the chaos of entropy will overtake the system. The natural state of any business is disorder.
Oh, absolutely.
The weekly review is the application of intentional order. And crucially, this is where you align your tactical outputs with your long-term vision.
The alignment check. Because it's very easy to efficiently run in the exact wrong direction.
Exactly. You look at your to-do list for the upcoming week, and you hold it up against your annual goals. If a task does not draw a direct logical line to your defined vision of success, it must be questioned.
Why are we even doing it?
Right. Why is it there? Is it a legacy process? Is it an ego project? If it doesn't serve the vision, it goes straight to the deletion quadrant.
I think we also have to acknowledge the messy middle of this transition. Implementing this framework is not, a quick weekend project. There is an implementation dip.
The implementation dip is the period where things actually get harder before they get easier.
Because it takes time to set all this up.
Exactly. Building an automated Zapier flow takes time. Writing a comprehensive SOP to delegate a complex task takes vastly more time than just doing the task yourself one more time. Firing a difficult client causes temporary revenue panic.
You have to pay the upfront cost of the architecture.
You have to push through the friction. But this is where the commitment to lifelong learning comes in.
How so?
The tech landscape is evolving at a breakneck pace. The automation tools available today are exponentially more powerful than they were even 2 years ago. The framework encourages you to not operate in a vacuum.
You have to stay curious.
You leverage online learning platforms, you study the documentation of your software stack, you network with other operators who have solved these specific routing problems. You treat operational efficiency as a continuous discipline, not a final destination.
Because the business will change. You will scale. You will add headcount. And processes that worked flawlessly for a team of 5 will spectacularly break for a team of 50.
And when they break, you don't panic. You just run the cycle again. Automate, delegate, delete. It is an iterative, infinite loop.
We have covered massive ground today. We have dismantled the cult of busyness and replaced it with an architectural mindset. To synthesize the core of what we've unpacked, the A.D.D method is not just a software recommendation. It is a radical, aggressive philosophy designed to protect your most finite resource, which is your time.
Spot on.
It demands that you automate the binary logistics to buy back your bandwidth. It demands that you deploy open source delegation to build the capability of your team. And it demands that you ruthlessly delete the noise so you can focus entirely on the 20% of the work that actually moves the needle.
But, the philosophy is useless if it remains theoretical.
Right.
So the immediate challenge for you listening to this right now, open your to-do list or your calendar. Do not try to automate a workflow today. Do not try to write a massive delegation SOP today.
Keep it simple.
Just find one single, low-value, soul-sucking task or obligation and delete it.
Just one.
Send the email saying you cannot attend the meeting. Cancel a report no one reads. Feel the visceral, terrifying, but ultimately liberating sensation of reclaiming your time.
I love that. Drop the ball on purpose today. And as you step back from the chaos and you begin to build this architecture in your own life, I want to leave you with one final, slightly heavier question to wrestle with on your own.
I'm intrigued.
If you are wildly successful with this, if you automate every single repetitive loop with flawless software, if you perfectly delegate every operational management duty to a brilliant, empowered team, and if you bravely delete all the meaningless corporate fluff, what is left?
That is the big question.
What is the core, undelegatable essence of you that remains? When you strip away all the busy work you've been hiding behind, what is the unique, irreplaceable art that only your human mind can bring to the world?
When you clear the canvas, you actually have to paint.
Exactly. The busy work is gone. Now the real work begins. Keep questioning the defaults, keep building better systems, and we will catch you next time.